Alright, so I know that may seem just a little exaggerated, but the idea was that I was dealing with uncertainty. Where to film this, and I chose my little sister's room. Point is that we all deal with uncertainty, whether it be uncertain about what choices to make, what major to choose, what school to go to, what career to choose, even what to eat for breakfast. We all deal with uncertainty. The communication theory that I want to discuss today is the uncertainty reduction theory. It's going to help us kind of find a way to balance out uncertainty and certainty in the crazy world we live in. So let's hop right into it.
Drink, swalla la la. Drink, swalla la la.
Okay, so communication is all about how we encode a message, send it to somebody, and how they decode that message. And it goes through any channel, so whether the channel be social media, a text message, phone call, face-to-face, there's always surrounded by some type of noise, whether it be contextual noise or literal noise, like a highway or something. So when you're talking to somebody and they don't quite understand what you're trying to, give them in communication, it can cause some confusion and some misunderstanding. And that's a lot of what uncertainty is. It's a misunderstanding of, exactly what's going on or what you want to do. So for this first example, we're going to go into an empty room scenario where you're sitting alone and then somebody sits right next to you and how uncertain you feel about the situation. So when we come back, we'll talk about that, and then we'll dive deep into uncertainty reduction theory.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing good.
Good.
Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Maybe a little extreme, maybe a little cheesy. That's fine. But let's dive right into exactly what the book says uncertainty reduction theory is. And that is how your communication is used to reduce uncertainties between strangers engaging in their very first conversation. Now, the text explains there's two types of uncertainty. The very first being cognitive uncertainty, and that is defined as a degree of uncertainty related to cognitions. This tends to go with our beliefs and attitudes, which are known as our cognitions. But the other type of uncertainty is behavioral uncertainty, and that's understood as the degree of uncertainty related to our behaviors. So when he sat down next to me in an empty room, I'm trying to figure out why his behavior isn't matching up with what I think is normal. Every theory has assumptions, and uncertainty reduction theory has about 5. And although most of those are important, I want to focus on the third assumption. And that third assumption reads like this. Interpersonal communication is a developmental process that occurs through stages, and it is the primary means of uncertainty reduction. So I guess your question is, are the phases like the phases of the moon? And to that I say absolutely not. The 3 phases are the entry phase, the personal phase, and the exit phase. So entry phase, as it says, is when you first interact with somebody. So the first time you enter into this relationship with the person. And no, this relationship doesn't mean Romeo and Juliet right away. Although it could. But hopefully nobody's dying. So anyway, once this takes place, a couple enters the personal phase. And couple, again, does not mean anything romantic necessarily. So once that takes place, the 2 people in the relationship enter the personal phase, which has a little more self-disclosure, which means you talk a little bit more about certain things, like, maybe your favorite color, your favorite movie, maybe what your home life is like, and even more spontaneity. So, maybe they'll text you out of nowhere, or maybe you'll see them in the hallway and you say hi to each other. And the final stage is the exit stage. And exit does not mean you break up the relationship necessarily. See, in this stage, people decide whether they want to continue the friendship, dating, or marriage, or if they're ready to go. So those are the 3 stages of uncertainty reduction. Okay, so now that we talked a little bit about the phases and the assumption that goes with those phases, we can talk about antecedents. So there's a couple antecedents that go with URT. The very first one starts with the potential to punish or reward. If we see the fact that hanging out with a person brings us popularity or more friends or a certain status, we count that as a reward. But if when we go up to that person and they act differently when other people are around, or they reject us completely, like my little sister gets a lot, then we see that as a punishment. When another person acts contrary to our own expectations, that's a second antecedent of URT. When social norms become violated, this becomes what the antecedent is all about. See, we all have social norms, things that we were raised to do or things that society says is normal. Like when you get in an elevator, not standing in front of the door, or facing the back of the elevator and your back's to the door. Or when you, when somebody has their headphones in, not, hey man, how you doing? Things like that are not normal. So when somebody does that, it creates a lot of uncertainty and makes us maybe a little anxious on the inside because we're not sure why this is going on. So after that you get past the reward and punishment, or the fact that they've either broken or contributed to your expectations, the last one is that we expect a future interaction with the other person. So this basically, all this means is that if I'm in a class with somebody and I see them every day and we have a relationship going on and we're trying to break uncertainty and break it down, then I should be seeing them and talking to them and interacting with them every time I see them for the foreseeable future. Now that we've talked about all of that, there's some strategies we can use to help reduce our uncertainty. The first strategy is the passive strategy. Now, it's when we observe a person without really being obtrusive. So we kind of see what they laugh at, what they wear, what they like, what kind of music they talk about, things like that, and then we decide whether or not to pursue it. Then there's an active strategy, and that's when we try to reduce the uncertainty by any means except for actually dealing with it, because that would only make sense. And then an interactive strategy is when you talk about the uncertainty. Just like any other relationship or anything else, it takes time to develop. And during those stages, there's a thing called relational uncertainty. And relational uncertainty is when you lack the certainty of if it's going to last or if it's worth lasting. And so there can be positive or it can be negative. If you want to pursue it, that's a positive uncertainty because now you're trying to figure out the steps to take to make it, last. But the negative is the other side of that, and that's to cut it off because there's nothing worth going for. But in all of this, in all relationships in any walk of life, you need context. And it depends on what culture you're from. So there's low and high context. High context culture is kind of like China. Listeners has the meaning internalized. They know exactly what they mean with what they say. There's no questions to be asked. It's straightforward. Unfortunately, here in America, we live in a low context where a lot of things have a lot of different meanings. And that can lead to a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of uncertainty to build up. I thought it'd be perfect time to give you an example of how uncertainty reduction works in my life. So, welcome to Storytime with Justice. How you doing? This story starts out like any other story. Boy and a girl. Basically, what this is going to be about is about the time I was rejected by a girl. But one day, this beautiful young lady walked in. I began to be mesmerized, staring at her, not even thinking about it. And she always stared back, but I never really knew if it was something worth, trying to pursue. One day, I mustered up the courage to ask the girl for a number. Kind of. I went up to her and I was like, hey. In my head, I had it all played out. I was going to be smooth. They were going to call me Cool J. I was gonna be dope, and I did not do that. So I went up to her and I was like, hey, well, I thought maybe since you were looking at, and she goes, so do you want my number? Yes, yep, that's what I want. Cool. So I began to text her, and she texted me back almost immediately. And as she texted me back, we began talking, and I was trying to play it cool, wasn't trying to, tell her, like, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Eventually, as it went on, I said we should maybe hang out sometime. And although she seemed interested, she really didn't say yes. So I kind of dropped it and just kind of kept the conversation going as friends. Eventually, she began to start flirting back. And then she asked me if I still wanted to go on that date. So we set up a date to go see a movie. And so I took her out to dinner as well. Well, as I was doing that, I went and bought flowers for her because that's what my big brother told me to do. And I bought flowers for her, and I went to the movies. And, we walked into the restaurant. And, the people there were all looking at her flowers and saying how gorgeous they were and how, they kind of nudged me and gave me the approval stare. It was great. Couldn't have gone any better. Dinner was great. Neither one of us ever looked at our phones. No, neither one of us were watching TV. It was just a conversation. It was good. We were laughing. We walked around, and she, posted a picture of me holding the flowers on her Snapchat. All her friends were blowing up her phone like, wow, he's a keeper. I'm thinking I'm in a perfect position. So then we get to the movie theater, and, we get there, and we get into the movie, and she asked if we could cuddle. Okay, sure. Why not? No big deal. So we cuddled a little bit. Nothing beyond that. Just, watching the movie. It was a scary movie, so really wasn't a lot of watching anyway. I was really scared. And now we're going to the car, and she's being kind of weird. So I was like, whatever. I said goodnight, and I went home. Get to my best friend's house, and we're talking a little bit. We're discussing how it went. I was talking about how great it went and how I felt like, I really made a good first impression. And we went to bed. And I woke up that morning to a long, long paragraph text about how I pushed it too far, how I made her feel uncomfortable, how I did all these things. So now I'm really sitting there like, whoa. So like any gentleman, I apologize for making her feel that way. And as I talked to my friends and my parents about it, they said that is the best thing to do. Just let it go, leave her alone, don't do nothing. So I did that, and I left her alone for about 2-3 weeks, and then I came right back in and was like, hey, maybe you can hear my side of things. And she was not feeling that. All just split up from there. And now we have to talk about a little bit about how that applies exactly to the theory. So all right, so cognitive uncertainty and behavioral uncertainty are two of the types of uncertainty that we talked about earlier. The one I want to talk about that applies to this is my behavioral uncertainty when it came to the armrest being lifted up to cuddle. See, I didn't expect that because one, I didn't know the armrest did that. But two, I didn't expect her to do something like that. So it kind of threw me a curveball. But I kind of let it slide because I was like, well, she did it, so it must not be a bad thing. So the different stages that we entered in this relationship were simple. The entry stage is when I asked her for a number and our first initial text conversation, when we kind of felt the waters out a little bit. Then the personal stage, we got there and the getting to know you questions for about 2-3 weeks, and then, the date, setting up the date itself. All right, so I know the exit phase is last and it only took one night to get there, which is, kind of embarrassing. But either way, the exit phase is when she decided that I would make her uncomfortable and that we had to move on from the relationship. And that's really unfortunate, but it's how it goes. And this also has a lot to do with context. Because to me, I was feeling that I understood exactly what was going on and contextual to the date, and later on found out that what I thought was wrong. It all goes back to the very beginning of communication when we talked about encoding and decoding. The message she sent to me when she lifted up that armrest, I decoded very differently than she did when she texted me later that night. And that's all that uncertainty reduction really is about. How do we decode information that we get to reduce uncertainty or heighten it? Because when she decided to do uncertainty avoidance, then she decided to avoid me completely and just not hear anything I had to say at the very end when I was trying to explain myself. Well, that was another communication vlog, and I just want to thank you guys so much for staying with me. I know it's a lot of information very quickly, but I hope you guys learned a little bit about how to reduce your uncertainty and also learned a little bit about how bad I am at first dates. See you guys.
Young money, young money, young money, young money.
Love in 1,000 different flavors.